Everyone good?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well then, hello everyone and welcome to the Mapmaking Spotlight Show for this week. I'm here with my co-commentator Skyhawk and our guest this week, Zaandaa, to discuss the CMJ Nexus. How are both of you doing?
Doing good.
I'm good. I'm just a very prolific map maker. Ready for my interview.
So we're going to be
And
trying a
becoming
different
more
kind
so.
of...
Oh, what'd you say, Skyhawk?
we're going to be trying a different sort of format this time. So I'm going to mostly leave it up to Zaandaa to kind of talk about his Nexus and the process of making it.
Yeah,
From the CMJ last week.
I don't see it so much as a different format as this is more of a presentation, and they're not going to be asking me as many questions. This is a
we'll
this is
still
a
be,
spotlight.
like, discussing things.
Yeah, this is a spotlight.
Kind of as we're going through, and if there's any kind of interesting things we want to focus on more, we can sort of stop you and go off on a tangent.
All right. Well, let me talk about how this started. Obviously, it started with an idea of a map jam, which, you're making a map in a limited amount of time. I just decided I might as well be the person that makes the Nexus for these map jams since I'm arranging them and that kind of stuff. And, it's a neat little challenge. I don't make maps, so might as well enjoy some fun in a map jam. I do have game development experience with messing around with a variety of different engines and libraries and a bunch of other stuff.
What kind of engines do you remember?
I personally like Python and Pygame. I've used Unity. Okay. I've used GameMaker. I've used a variety of stuff.
I didn't know that.
Those are the ones I've used the most, though.
Yeah.
But primarily just hobbyist kind of things. Just mess around with little prototype games.
Yeah.
So in the past, I've done game jams, and these game jams are you make a game, a whole game. Usually in a bigger team of people, you got a few others. You got an artist and a programmer and all that. That's really the core. So I'm used to working in that kind of environment because I've done a bunch of those for fun with some friends. So it was cool to bring it into Dustforce.
Yeah, very closely inspired by that format.
Yeah. A lot of those are also 8 hours, not 24 hours. So.
Oh wow, I haven't heard of ones that short.
Yeah, so we might try some short map jam ones in the future, but don't worry too much about that at the moment. Now the goal for, or actually I'll start with the theme. So for the first map jam, the theme was really easy to understand. It's something that you could picture. It was volcano. So, when it comes to thinking about the themes for this one, that's really how I really want everything to be everything to back up the theme. So if anyone's watched the week in review, then if I want to go really in depth on the design of a level, or if I want to talk about stuff from the perspective of a judge in the competition, I'm thinking a lot about how everything kind of supports the theme of a level or a Nexus. And there's obviously no exception here, because I wouldn't even bother making something like this if I didn't have something to tie it all together. But considering I was in the position of organizing the event, I was the one to choose the theme. And last time, to compare it with Volcano, which it's something that you can pretty easily picture, and you can think of maps that are either in a volcano or around a volcano. There might be lava involved, that kind of stuff. And that's not really that hard to do from a simple Dustforce perspective, in order to picture a level. But
this one's abstract in comparison.
Yeah, there are different kinds of themes that you can have. So in a game jam, a lot of themes might be more gameplay related, you only live once, or You know, something gameplay specific, like one hit point, or gravity, you know, things that make you think about mechanics. So I wanted to think of something more abstract, that could influence people in a way that they can kind of interpret the gameplay, not like, you know, the aesthetics. Because not all people are on aesthetics. Not all people want to do aesthetics.
Right. Yeah, and I think that did succeed. There, we saw quite a few maps where there were like 2-based mechanics.
Yeah. So yeah, the theme was 2. That's how it came about, and 2 is able to be interpreted a bunch of different ways, because you know it's so vague. I was expecting, and I was thinking about preparing in the Nexus. One, there would be a potential section for multiplayer, 2-player maps, because last time there were people that wanted to make 2-player maps for some reason also. So I figured, hey, you know, this team, funnily enough, supports that really easily.
Yeah.
But, you know, we ended up getting a little bit less of that this time, somehow.
Yeah, I think we got, like, the 2-player maps that people did make, I guess just maybe because of last time, they also made them possible 1-player, just because they knew the format that we would be approaching this.
Yeah. And I was also thinking people might pair up maps together. So there might be like a light map and a dark map. That's, you know, a good use of 2. There are 2 maps. 2 maps that go together. A little bit thinking outside the box. Not like, here there are 2 enemies in the whole level, or there's 2 of each enemy. Which there are some good levels associated with that kind of stuff. You'll just have to check them out in the map jam too. But yeah, people thinking about gameplay. So with that in mind, my goal for the Nexus was, I ended up thinking like, okay, well, I had the theme, let's say about 1 to 2 weeks in advance of the map jam. That's when I really decided on, yeah, I'll go with this as the theme. Because like I'm just kind of sitting there doing nothing. There's no real prep work that goes into a map jam. You just come up with a theme and then let it go. Then at some point I was just like, you know what? There's some script stuff that I've been messing around with that would actually fit this theme really well. And it was specifically the 2 sides. I was looking into how you could shade certain sprites, how you can draw sprites on screen, that kind of stuff. Because I've looked into scripting in the game in general, and like, you know, just kind of experimented around with plugins. Because I care more about that kind of thing personally, less map stuff, more interesting gameplay plugin kind of scripts.
Which you've made a lot of good ones.
I made a lot of easy ones, like Infinite Super. Now there's a leaderboard.
Yeah.
So let me show off.
The simple ones are good for plugins, because it's like, yeah, just small modification on the format that people already know.
So here's an example of some dynamic sprite drawing. Now I borrowed Epon's sprites from the map gels, and I made it so that you know, based on where the player is, it changes the color of the sprite. And when I was messing around with it, I sent a similar version to Epon. I was just like, hey, this is an example of, you know, something I can do, where basically I did this, but I made, if you're farther away from the enemies, they're faded a little bit bluer. You know, they kind of blend into the background a little bit more. They're farther away. You know, just an example of how something like that can be used. So it's got transparency, and it's got the color change. Just an easy example here in this map.
Okay.
So that's just this is custom sprites though. This is not, you know, existing enemies. It does
So I
happen
guess
to
the
be
next thing you
a
tried
prism
was the
replacement
player.
script, which I asked Skyhawk for to get started.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, so these are prisms. I'm replacing the sprite with Epon's existing sprite, which those happen to also be animated. And then I'm applying, basically I'm only using one aspect, or I'm altering one, I'm just altering one argument of the draw function, and it shades to a certain color. It draws it with a certain color, the sprite that you're trying to draw, and it also has alpha. So with custom sprites that, you know, they're not drawing anything, they don't have anything underneath it, you're able to do partial transparency stuff. If you did this with like a bear, then, you know, you'll have the normal bear underneath it. I'll need to prepare something different. Like I don't have a good example for a source. This is like I can give you the files associated with this, but it's not going to be easily reusable in the way that I have it set up, I'll just say. But you can ask me questions about that more specifically
I think it
later.
would be mostly based on one of my scripts, but I don't think I
Yeah,
have it on GitHub yet, so I can.
There's very little different from a normal prism replacement script in this. But I'm not going to go into details on how the scripting works for this. In this case, basically just assume it shades it a certain color. So you know how at the end of drawing, there's the color argument, and just put something in there, except also make it dependent on where the player is in relation to the enemy.
Yeah.
That's really all there is to it. Yeah, there's a good script from Skyhawk.
Yeah, not quite as fancy as this one, but it'll show you how to do enemy code.
Yeah. So that's an example of one of the scripts that I had in mind. And then this is just a generic testing map. You know, every now and then I'll mess around with the script stuff, and I'll put it in this map because, you know, there's a prism here. Now I'm gonna turn on show boundaries, and I'm gonna start to explain how the teleporting works. So I decided I wanted two sides of the Nexus. There's gonna be a right half and a left half, and you're just gonna teleport whenever you hit taunt. Pretty easy use of theme, just a simple mechanic. So at this point, I was basically just thinking like, okay, well, I have a few ideas associated with all this, but it's not actually time for the map jam yet. So me personally, I thought, hey, well, it's okay if I cheat a little bit. I'm gonna write a little bit of testing script, because, well, if I know I can hold myself to a certain standard, but not everybody else, obviously. You know, really high up there. This is me joking, by the way. This is I was messing around with scripts associated with the theme, because, well, the only real stipulation I put on myself was if the code doesn't just work really quickly, I can't validate putting it in the Nexus for the map jam. Like it would just straight up be way too unfair if I spent a lot of time on it. So I made sure I limited myself in terms of how much time I worked on it, and I made sure everything was simple enough so that I didn't have a super big advantage. But yeah, I definitely had a huge head start by I had way too much of a head start. Yeah. But anyway, I tested a lot of script stuff in that time for fun, because, you know, I was learning a bunch of stuff. and we'll go over some of the things that I learned and how to influence the Nexus.
Yeah, just learning scripting stuff isn't too much of an advantage.
Yeah.
Like, it could just be general purpose scripts, not necessarily CMJ related.
So at this time, my goal for the Nexus, there are two main scripts that I wanted to write. One is I wanted to have the two sides and the teleporting between them, and two, I wanted to adapt the minigame that I wrote for last time, and I'll show that off, how that happened after I describe the teleporting. So those are the only two scripts that I really needed to worry about for the Nexus. And I thought, hey, well, I could pretty easily combine them both together. I'll get into how it influenced the minigame, but you can really easily picture yourself, swapping in between the sides as you're playing the same minigame. So here's a simple player mirror script. You'll notice that there's no fancy drawing in this version. It's just drawing like a shadow, and the reason why is because it's done in the fog trigger.
Okay.
Which
like in the actual map.
Yeah, I just draw it on a certain layer.
Right. Okay. And then you can set that layer to whatever color you need. That makes sense.
Maybe this. Not that. Alright, well, I'm gonna...
You might have needed to select the trigger first before you could... Because it might have been that one, you just needed to have the trigger clicked on. No. Oh, now is the script in the map?
Okay. So yeah, it's handled in the fog trigger.
Yeah, okay. Sweet.
So what this does, and the camera's going to do some weird stuff. I'll explain what's going on with that.
Yeah, it's just cameras don't play nice with this, I guess.
Yeah, that's one of the first things on the list for how the teleport script evolved and influenced the camera. So let me actually not use this fog trigger, because
I think actually Avenged had a similar problem with their map.
Yeah,
they were doing some teleporting stuff too.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I'm sitting right here, Skyhawk.
What? Okay. So basically, it's just showing me mirrored across the axis. When I hit taunt, I switch sides. It's really easy to code this because basically you're just swapping the sign on the Dustman X. And I'm changing what direction Dustman's facing. And then I also set the velocity. So, I dash in this direction, then I swap. Okay, well, I switch to which direction Dustman's going. So you only had to switch a few values. It's a really easy script to do.
Okay.
But obviously I notice, hey, well, the camera's kind of weird. Like, I actually don't want the camera to do weird stuff. Also, the camera detaches from the line when you get too far away. So, there are instant benefits. It works really quickly, but it's a little bit weird around the edges. The camera is strange to work around. So, in order to make the camera work, you could. There are two main things that I could have done. So one, I start with just a normal connect node, and then these are just normal camera nodes. So you could say, okay, well, these are too high. You get too far away from them. They're too high, and that's actually not the case. You have to start moving again for it to pick you up again sometimes.
What if they were connect node, or did you make them connect nodes?
Yeah. So then the next thing is, okay, well, what if you just make connect nodes, and let's just make them really big, because I want to make sure I cover all of the possible places that you could connect.
curious how this is gonna work. Is it gonna do like the smoothing thing?
So, this works sometimes,
Oh,
but
yeah.
not all
Okay.
the time. Did that make this a connect node? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of like overextended it, teleported the camera to the player directly, and then moved back to the node.
Yeah. So, this isn't very good to have in like a fast-paced kind of environment. It's very
Yeah.
strange to feel the camera move like this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's good when it's like instantaneous, right where you're standing still. But
I wonder if you could like mirror the camera position as well.
well, I do end
Like
up doing
in-
that
in
in the
the
script.
script.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
you do? Okay.
yeah, in the script, in order to in order to frame advance, so I teleport, it instantly switches where the camera is. Now the
Right,
camera
yeah.
has to be like, well, hold on, man. I need to reconnect to this line. Now
Yeah.
let's
Then it
do
shifts
this in
itself.
midair. So when you're in midair, you switch the camera, and now you see this dot on the right side. The camera's just
Yeah.
like, hold on, I need to get back over there. So
Yeah,
it
yeah.
goes all the way over. So if
I
you're in
think
midair,
there
it
is-
doesn't know what to do.
Yeah. I think Avenged had a solution to that. If you're still here. I mean, of course, I know you're still
Yeah,
here.
I'm here.
If you want to kind of
Yeah.
explain.
We had a similar problem in my map because when I was doing the teleport down, there wasn't really a good way to deal with the camera outside of a script. So we ended up basically just setting the camera last location and current location within the script after the teleport, and then using a force node to reconnect.
Yeah. So the next thing I tried was a force node, at the very least. So now there are two issues that exist at the moment. It's one, going from far away, and then there's two, it's really strange when you connect to the same camera node again. Which
like on
I
the
showed
same
it.
path.
Yeah, I showed it a couple times, but so here we have some force nodes, and you'll see like, okay, well, it's much faster and it's snapping, as
Yeah.
you might expect. But the problem is more evident in the middle. So there's gonna be a certain spot that you can stand in. Oh, what is this? So in this case, these force nodes have, you know, if an area is not covered by a force node, it's still going to react in a strange way. So you might think, okay, well, let's put force nodes everywhere. Let's even make this first one at the beginning of force node, and
Yeah.
that doesn't
But
actually
then you
change
get-
what happens for the first one.
And it also gives you overlapping force nodes,
Yes.
which we've seen is a problem.
So this works sometimes, but yeah, overlapping force nodes, when it comes to this kind of thing, you really can't have too many of them.
Yeah, if you
Not
wanna
in
check
terms
out
of lag, but because the camera just acts strangely in between them.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, I was gonna say for the lag reasons, like, if anybody hasn't seen it yet, check out Lag Hill on Atlas, because that's a good example of how overlapping force nodes can go wrong. But
I
Yeah, it
still
does seem
can't
like
believe
more-
that's a vanilla map.
yeah, it does seem more jittery even without lagging. In this
Yeah.
case.
So when you have two force nodes fighting at the same time, you'll notice that the camera location, it acts more jagged again, kind of like the you know, when things were really far away in the camera tutorial. Well, when you have two force nodes fighting over each other, then
Mhm.
the camera acts the same way, with it being kind of jittery on location.
Right.
So, with this in mind, I'm going to demonstrate like a possible. Let me think of how to describe this. So let me demonstrate a very simple test of how the Nexus would end up going.
Sure.
So, in a similar, or using that script, I always expected there to be a big wall in the middle, and I wanted, this will be described a little bit more later too, but I really wanted to focus on teaching the player this mechanic. So,
I think
I wanted to.
I watched a bit of the stream, and it seemed like a few people didn't quite understand the taunt mechanic, just because like the taunt button is so rarely used.
Yeah, that's just a challenge, no matter what.
I don't think there's any way around that. But it was interesting to see, like, it took people a minute to figure out, oh, I'm supposed to be swapping sides.
Well, that's by design also.
Yeah.
So I was thinking at first I would want the Nexus laid out kind of similarly to what I have right here, and I guess I'll make this a little smaller. So this is me basically thinking about initial prototype of the Nexus.
Sure.
So my initial idea for how it would work out. I don't have a version of the prototype, but I'm basically just duplicating it.
Yeah.
So I feel like I would start off with you have this camera that shows you what's going on. It immediately connects, but then
so you can see both sides.
Then I needed to detach. So I wanted it to connect, and then when you switch sides, I wanted to detach. Because you now have the freedom to play around in the Nexus, and after after that point, it should detach. You first see, hey, hit taunt, switch sides, then it detaches, and you can go play the Nexus. So I was thinking.
Wait, so when you're inside that connect radius, it's still detached? That's kind of interesting. I didn't know it behaved that way. But yeah, like the whole idea.
It's gimmicky. The way that I set up the camera right there is a little bit specific. To how it works.
I don't think I've ever seen that before.
From what I already know, but yeah. So what I'm thinking is I'm gonna have similar to the last map jam. I'm gonna have the minigame take place in the Nexus, and it'll be kind of central, how everything works.
I mean, it has to be central to like the concept, not centrally located.
Both actually.
Because I mean, it has to be centrally located because of the way the script works with the mirroring.
Yeah. So this camera, it does reconnect. So I'm just gonna make it a lot smaller.
Yeah, you could probably do like an interest node thing.
Yeah.
Connect node on the right, interest node in the middle. But yeah.
There.
That
this is actually what I had in my original idea.
Yeah. Neat.
So me solving this problem was, alright, well, I'll just make it so you can't land up there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, something like that,
So
just
you don't
imagine
get
it's
the
symmetrical.
radius.
So you switch sides, the camera moves over there, and then it detaches. Now you're able to switch sides. And at this point I'm thinking, okay, well, I can have a really interesting way of showing this on screen with a certain kind of color coding. I'm not gonna have the fog trigger on this that shows the color trigger, shows that. But I'll have this wall here. It implies that the wall on the other side does not exist because of what color it is, and you can clearly see you know, there's gonna be
Yeah.
something in the background right here that matches it. Yeah, so really clearly showing off the whole mirror aspect of the Nexus right off the bat. And then it wasn't gonna be too detailed or anything like that. It was just gonna be, this is what it is. So, you know, you happen to have this kind of script, and then you've just got doors on all these platforms. And then the idea for the mini game was, all right, well, since you've got this Nexus going on, I'll just have the prisms come in from the sides. So imagine, like, oops. Imagine that when you start the mini game, the prisms start coming from these areas from either side.
Yeah, okay.
And then
Like
the camera would be much more zoomed out.
Okay.
So it'd be, let's say, more like this, or like this. So it'd probably be a little bit smaller. You know, there would be some of the Nexus that's not used for the minigame. That's fine. It'll just be like you jumping around in between these platforms and then hitting the prisms as they go from either the left side or the right side toward the middle. And then when they reach the middle, you know, something happens and maybe you lose. And that's basically as far as I got with the concept. You know, I already had a really simple script that does all this. So in playing with the camera, I learned that you actually don't want to just litter this whole area with force nodes. It was going to be easier because of the spacing in between all the force nodes, and actual iteration order makes the difference between which force node for the camera picks up on the player, and then it'll still kind of jitter in between the two of them and pick which side it's going to be on.
Right.
So
and I think
the camera
works well for this sort of thing anyway.
Yeah, the camera being that complicated and me wanting to avoid spending too much time on it made me be like, okay, well, it's actually going to just be fine if I ignore all of the camera details and I start to focus on all the other stuff. It's gonna be too long, you know, not in the spirit of the map jam at that point. So it needs to stay this concise.
Yeah.
So at that point, you know, this script is done, pretty much. This player mirroring script, and this is basically all I was working with that in mind. And at that point, then I started thinking about the mini game, how it's adapted. So it's actually really straightforward. I don't have a script at the moment that shows prisms coming in from the sides, but it's a very easy change from what I have right now. And this is the story of how that changed, actually. So what ended up happening was I started to feel like, you know, this is actually just a lot of space, and I don't think like it's a very good use of space. Not only that, like, I actually came across a problem with how to attack stuff in terms of attacking while teleporting, which
would be a
I
problem
guess
for the game.
Yeah, that'll be after the use of space. So I felt like, you know, you really can't maneuver in this area that fast, and you're traveling a long distance to go from one side to the other. You know, there's a lot of stuff you have to look at. You gotta turn your whole head.
Yeah, I also think just like the script isn't used outside of just that first room. Like, it's just a bunch of platforms. Like, the script could basically not be there and the experience wouldn't change that much.
Somewhat, yeah. It adds another layer of depth to having to play the minigame. And so for the minigame itself...
Like, with the way the platforms are laid out. Like,
well, yeah.
You just walk around this Nexus like normal, and the teleporting doesn't really make it more interesting just to walk around. But yeah, the minigame, of course, is its own thing.
Yeah, the minigame was thought about before any puzzles were added.
Okay. Gotcha.
So if you've been paying attention, you may have noticed I'm not talking at all about, you know, there being puzzles in the Nexus, because that wasn't even thought about at this point.
Right.
So the Nexus was, initially just gonna be you have all this that's on screen pretty much, and you've got plenty of room for doors. It'd be very similar to the first one. So I'll just save this, so I'll leave it as is. But let's look at the first Nexus. So, I'm basically in the first Nexus. I focused a lot on visuals because I hadn't really done anything like that before. Just experimenting around with all that, and it's just a lot of doors in a small area.
Yeah.
So I'm coming from this kind of perspective of like I could have something that looks kind of cool and just a lot of doors in a small area. And then I did pretty quickly decide that I wanted to put the names by the doors. That was just an improvement overall, I think. Just simplifying the credits significantly.
Yeah, simplifies it, and from a player perspective, it's easier because you don't have to just go and like match up the name and figure out what's what. You can just see, oh yeah, this one's this person.
I did still know that I wanted a... So for the structure of the minigame, once you hit this prism, down at the bottom, it starts a minigame where it spawns a bunch of prisms that are in place at set locations. There's a score that shows up. Functionally, it's very similar to the second Map Jam minigame script. I did just reuse pretty much everything in there. The only difference is from what you see and what you see here in 1 and what we got in 2 are prisms started moving, and you didn't have a timer as much as you had a once they reached the bottom, and once 3 of them reached the bottom, it ended. But once they reach the middle in the original version, they come in from the left or the right. But we're pretty much just working with this in mind. Like, when it runs out, okay, it just resets. So I'm just thinking, alright, well, I'll have something similar in this example prototype Nexus. I don't know where I'll put the prism, but it doesn't matter.
You mentioned before that the volcano theme was more of like a visual theme, and so I think it's interesting how that Nexus was also just, it used the visuals of a volcano, whereas this one, you ended up using more of the mechanics of 2, like you mentioned that you wanted other people to do. Yeah,
when I was streaming, starting the Nexus, I was starting to focus on visuals, and I was just like, I'm going nowhere. And I could have focused more on it, or tried to, but then I wouldn't have been able to finish up, the level itself. So that was just a trade-off I had to make, where I spent as little time as possible on visuals this time.
Have to prioritize somehow.
Yeah. So initially, I was thinking, you would see, so you see yourself and the mirrored player basically on screen, and I was thinking, okay, well, I want the prisms to show up on both sides. I want them to be visible on both sides so that like, okay, well, on this other side of the screen, something's about to happen. You got to know so that it's not unfair. Like, we have to stand out anyway. But then part of the challenge is sometimes you got to switch which side you're on.
Right. Now,
there are different ways that I was considering doing this. One, I can duplicate the hitbox. So that's kind of skipping ahead. So I was thinking initially, light prisms, the rectangles, were going to be duplicated. They were gonna show up on both sides, but heavy prisms are the ones that you gotta switch for. They can only be heavied from that side.
Interesting.
So like either you or your mirrored self would be capable of hitting a light prism, but it would not be capable of hitting a heavy prism.
Right.
So you would have to be on the correct side of the heavy prism. That was what was going to force people to switch sides. It was a very late decision change in balancing, like after testing, that I decided, it doesn't really matter. Like, I'll just have the prism on only one side. But at
I
first,
think both methods are interesting.
yeah, at first it was either I duplicate the hitbox, or I duplicate the prism. But either way, I need to show a mirror of the heavy prisms also. The hexagons, I needed to show them on both sides, and I would just adapt this player mirror script for that purpose too, for showing them twice.
Yeah, because it's the same logic. Just draw them with negative coordinates.
Yeah, now there are actually a lot of challenges with getting this working, and that's why I didn't end up doing it. It's mainly because so in duplicating hitboxes, when you have a hitbox, they're associated with owners, and keep in mind this is done with the limitation of time. So I'm trying to do this quickly. And I know from game jam experience, if I don't have enough time to, figure out how something works relatively quickly, I'm probably just gonna have to scrap it, because this is primarily a mechanics kind of thing that I'm thinking about, and I still have to make room for all these doors and all this other stuff.
Yeah, if something's not going well, move on.
Yeah. So with hitboxes, I would create another hitbox, but it would force me to tie it to the owner, because that's just a requirement, an argument.
Yeah.
And what happens is hitboxes every frame are just like, hey, where's my owner? My owner moved. I need to update my location in relationship to the owner. So I would duplicate it, but it's just right on top of Dustman. It doesn't actually duplicate it in the location that I want it to be in.
Yeah,
and
there are probably workarounds, but at that point, it's like figuring out how to get it to work is just too much effort.
Correct.
Too much trouble.
So yeah, if I had a way of creating a separate hitbox altogether, which there probably is a way to do that kind of stuff with collisions, and I didn't have enough time to look into it, I would have done it that way. But in the way that it happened, I certainly don't regret how it turned out, because I prefer how it is now. So then I tried to also another thing is I wanted to make sure that heavies, although heavies were duplicated, they wouldn't just defeat the heavy prisms. So I was able to lower the damage of the duplicated hitbox to 1, which I discovered, it turns out heavy prisms, they just require you to pass a certain threshold of damage in order to be destroyed.
Is that how that works? Or is it like it has to be exactly 3?
It might have to be exactly 3, but I did learn that dust spread is only created by attacks that do exactly 3 damage.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, so that's how I learned that, and I think I mentioned it to you around the same time. That I realized that this was the case.
I've heard a few people realize that, and it's funny how it's hard coded like that.
Yeah, I mentioned it to a couple people for fun, because it's just related to some discussion. I was like, hey, fun fact, heavies only spread dust because they do 3 damage. If you make a light do 3 damage, it'll spread dust. If you make a heavy do 4 damage, it won't spread dust. But I was expecting to have another script in here that prevented dust spread anyway, so that's not really relevant. But making a heavy do only 1 damage made it not kill the big prism, even though it's a heavy. So that was kind of neat. And either way, duplicating hitboxes wasn't the right solution. It was just a little too messy and possibly time-consuming to create a new kind of thing for that. So then I was like, okay, well, if I can't duplicate a hitbox, I'll just duplicate the side that the light prisms are on, because those are really the only thing that I need to hit on either side. So I have a class that I made for entity pairing that functionally works. Like it works. I have just entity data there for like, hey, you're attached to this one. If you get removed, remove your partner.
Like a pretty clean solution.
Yeah. So whenever you create a new prism, whenever there's a new entity created, depending on what it is, it creates a certain type. And you know, if it's this square, then do the second entity on the other side. So I no longer needed to tie those entities to one side or the other. They could just be on, you know, they would always be on the left and their partner's always on the right. But at some point I was just like, you know what, I really don't like the way this feels. It just feels like this is too big of an area. There's not really that much interesting gameplay. It's just a huge camera. Things are going towards the middle. I was like, how can I make this a little bit more interesting, maybe a little bit more challenging? I was thinking maybe there's just a death zone underneath you. I can make it stop when that happens. So I was thinking I could have little spikes in the Nexus at this point. In thinking of how to make the minigame more challenging and potentially more interesting, I was thinking about things that I could put in the Nexus in association with the script. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, with that in mind, what if I had like a little section where, you know, there's just this little box, and then you can only get in it from one side. So there's a door on top there. That's a really straightforward, easy kind of puzzle. I'm kind of surprised I didn't end up using that exact one in that manner, but I did.
You kind of did. You just
I
didn't
did
have
in
like
the
a
middle.
full box.
Yeah, there's no like floating island for it. It's just right there next to the middle. But that's
Which I
still,
think was a good introduction.
yeah, it's still something I wanted to improve. But you know, this is like the building blocks of that. But when I was thinking of starting to add all this other stuff, I was like, well, I really don't need the Nexus to be where this game takes place, because you know, there's just a lot of stuff going on at this point. So I was like, okay, well, I can have a reason to have the prism, like I'll just put it down at the bottom at this point, and then somehow you'll be able to figure out how to get to the bottom.
Yeah, just give it its own dedicated area.
Yeah, and then we'll just put the prism at the bottom. So, you know, really straightforward. And then I was just thinking, okay, well, what if I don't remember how I came to the thought where, oh, okay, yeah, I remember the other thought. So there was a challenge I forgot to write down, actually, and it was the whole reason I moved it from horizontal to vertical. After I wrote the first script and I tested it, I realized all these platforms are actually getting in the way. So what's happening is the prisms were colliding with the platforms, and I didn't have a way to override that collision quickly. Like,
how are you moving them though? Like, was it just a normal?
I was setting the position manually.
Path?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would think that it wouldn't do collision then.
Yeah, I was thinking the same, but I couldn't force them inside structures like this.
Well,
so
when you say you were setting position, was it just like current position plus some amount?
Well,
or was it
that's
like
not how
you
it
had
works, but yeah, set X basically. Like,
well, because
this dot
what I'm
X
thinking
equals
is,
this. There's no movement. It's just teleport a small amount every frame.
Right, but I'm thinking like maybe it would teleport the amount, and then it would do the collision check, and it would teleport, like it would get pushed back, and then you would just you'd get stuck doing that same movement teleport over and over. Anyway,
Yeah.
I guess it's not important, but the thing is, yeah, the takeaway is just that there was a problem with it.
Yeah, so what would actually happen is when there were places in the level that weren't totally symmetric and something collided, so for these light prisms, really I only needed to keep track of the one on the left, and that would keep moving forward, and then I don't technically have to move the one on the right from like a velocity or any acceleration or anything like that. I can just you know, copy over negative X value, and then it just mirrors where it is. So this would work except for when one of them starts colliding, and then, you know, they don't desync exactly, they just stop moving.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, because the thing, like, the mirror image will stop for apparently no reason.
yeah. So that was something I was like, okay, well, I don't have a good solution to this. I kind of just need nothing in the way, and that'll make it a lot more interesting. But with nothing in the way, there's nothing to stand on. At that point, I was like, okay, well, actually, what if I just made them come down from the top, and then you stood on the bottom?
And then just have nothing in the way.
Yeah, at this point, I was like, okay, well, now I can make it a lot smaller of a screen, a lot more zoomed in. And that's how I came to making it vertical and they fall from each side. Then at some point I'm like, well, now there's also not really a reason to have the duplication of the little ones in quite the same way. Let me now show what it's like. Okay, so there's still a little bit of fancy stuff going on, but we have one on one side and we just have it shown on the other side as well.
Yep.
And I was thinking, okay, with everything so close together, there's not really any challenge anymore if your lights just hit either side. So I'll just make you switch for every single time you hit it. And that makes sense. Like, there's not really any reason for me to wait until there's a heavy prism to switch, because now there wouldn't be really any challenge to the mini game. Like, oh yeah, I could just hit this one again too, and I wouldn't have to switch sides. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and it works out because that way you don't have to deal with any potential problems with the hitboxes.
Yeah, and this is where I figured out the actual problem with hitboxes, because I was just able to, like, now that I'm able to play test the mini game, I'm like, okay, well, it turns out hitboxes don't actually work as expected, and this is much easier to show off in the enemy test one.
Sure.
Okay, so here is an alternate version of the script, and let me turn on hitboxes and filth projections. So when you do an attack and you teleport in the middle, it makes sense. Like, hey, it just worked. It updated. Yeah, it just worked. That's great. It updated the location of the owner. It changed the attack face. It changed all this stuff. It just works. But actually, it doesn't work only for side attacks. So I'm standing on the left here. I do a side attack to the right. The hitbox you see is to my right. I now teleport. The hitbox actually stayed on my right. And
even though the player turned around.
Yeah, I was like, hold on, why is the side hitbox not working correctly? Why is it not attached the same way? And I was trying to debug this for a while. Trying to figure out, like, okay, what if I didn't switch the face? What if I didn't switch the attack face? And none of that would have the effect necessary, and they would change the other stuff. And what you can actually see here is, wow, it looks like the filth projection was updated, but not the hitbox for some reason. So I saw that and I was like, okay, well, then theoretically that means. The attack
sprite was also kind of weird.
Theoretically that also means I could. So if I wanted to hit this dust, and the prism. So what I want to do is I can stand here, I start down heavy, and you're like, okay, well, that down heavy is gonna hit the dust because the field projections update correctly. Well, it turns out if you start the side heavy and then switch, the heavy will stay on that side, but your field projection will update correctly. So you will clear the dust, create dust, you'll clear dust, hit the prism, and then create dust away from you.
Oh, good.
With this prism.
It's based on the attack.
Yeah, because of its attack. So that's
Amazing.
complicated.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man,
Boxes are not playing nice there.
yeah, I can't figure this out in time, and I had to make it so that you can't. I decided, okay, well, there are two solutions here. I continue to waste time trying to figure this out, or like I manually code something, and like there's all this other stuff. But the easier and more natural solution is I take away the ability to teleport in attack startup.
Oh, okay.
So
I didn't even notice.
this is only noticed when you play the minigame and you have to try to do it, and it honestly does make sense as something that you should be able to do. So there are some people that I know that got tripped up because like they try to do an attack and then I don't explain that you're not allowed to reverse or teleport during it.
Right.
But I did have to make it so that you're allowed to teleport after the attack is triggered. Although, fun fact of
during
that,
the end lag of the attack.
yeah, although the attack being triggered doesn't actually. Okay, so a hitbox has the value on it of is it triggered, yes or no. It hasn't been triggered yet. This is show AI, by the way, in Dustmod, for those unaware. It says triggered equals true. Well, that's actually something that I still need to wait 2 frames after doing because of iteration order.
Oh, okay.
I waited 1 frame and I don't remember
and it still didn't
how
work.
that worked out. Like I'm pretty sure it still didn't work out. So I was just like, okay, fine, I'll still wait a little bit longer. That'll just guarantee I don't have to worry about this at all. It'll just get rid of the problem. Sure, I won't be able to attack mid startup, but that's a small price to pay in a map jam setting where like it just works. I can move on. And at this point, the scripts I think are just done.
I think
because I solved.
Kind of hiccup.
Yeah, all I needed to do was balance the mini game. And at this like we're just talking about at this point, I've only formulated that I have some blocks that are gonna be on certain sides in the Nexus.
Yeah, you want those puzzles.
Yeah.
And so now you can focus more on designing those puzzles.
Yeah. And the only job left is to teach people about this mechanic. And that's honestly one of the most fun parts of the process, because that goes into gameplay and like puzzle design and the discovery of wow, I can do this. Like, hey, that's neat. Because I really wanted with all this stuff in mind, I was like, okay, well, I just wanted this mini game as a little treat at the end. But now I've got this really cool mechanic that I can really play around with now that I have all this other stuff. So from this step, I'm thinking, okay, the next things I need are I need all the doors. I need space for the doors. I've decided I now can put little pieces of puzzle design here and there throughout it, but I do need to teach how the mechanic works. And then I need some way to get to the mini game. I was just like, okay, well, I'll just put like a little difficult level section, like a little secret on the way. Like that, I didn't really think about it at all. It's just one of those. I guess after you've played all the levels, far away from the levels, there's just this area that maybe you can find a puzzly kind of way to get into, and then you maybe do a couple more harder challenges, because we've basically built up to it at this point.
Right.
I've also decided that I want free camera at this point, because
yeah, we've already looked at the problems with camera paths.
The camera was just a little janky. I did end up needing certain places for the camera, because I did want to teach people effectively, and that was really the immediate thing that I needed to worry about.
Yeah, like having the starting area where you can see both sides, like making sure that it's centered so the mirror is really obvious.
Yeah. So basically at this point, the process is I need to think of it as it's kind of like a story. How do you learn how all this stuff works? I'm expecting the player to go through a process of learning a mechanic from scratch. And basically what I start with is I want to introduce them to the concept. I want them to get used to the kind of stuff that they see on screen, but I don't really want them to think about it yet. I don't want to go straight into it and be like, you got to do all this stuff before you can play the levels. And in being in a Nexus, I have the advantage of this is something that people always have to return to. But I don't have to make it like super challenging all the time. I don't have to make it like really boring to just walk from one to the next. So I can give like little pieces between most of them of like, here's this other little cool gimmick use of this thing. But in essence, I'm basically just looking at like, how do I introduce the concept? Like that's the most important thing. After that, I can worry about the gameplay.
And the variations on it.
Yeah. So I start with I already know I'm gonna have these platforms look a certain way, and if people want, I can describe how it works. But basically, it's just stuff on different layers to make the platforms look that way. So at this point, the player comes in the Nexus. They see a couple doors. They see only a few colors to focus on. I know there are some people that are just like they'll try to move around. I just need to make sure that they don't stray too far. But I need to present all of the information that you need to know visually. Almost all of that is already presented to the player, and they don't even have to think about it right here. And I need to make sure that the camera doesn't show too much by the time you get here.
Because for the first 2 levels, you're just not even using the mechanic at all, and then you kind of funnel the player towards the explanation.
Yeah, basically I'm giving the player a chance to wonder about the Nexus. Like, okay, well, I feel like maybe I will be able to go through here at one point. People have that curiosity, like, what am I supposed to do to get past here? It looks like I might be able to get past this purple thing or this purple thing on the right. But, the level is visually hinting with the camera to go left and towards these levels. They play the levels. They see these kind of door outlines, but, there's no real importance to it. There's nothing that people have to do about it. They see, at this point, they should also see, like, these 2 purple blocks that are blocking off paths to other doors. If you tried to think about it at this point, which like people aren't really gonna think that hard about it, because clearly they after they play Miles level, they go left, and then at that point the camera takes them, and in the middle it just says taunt twice with an arrow, and that's really all I need to say to get things started.
Because as soon as they start experimenting with the buttons, they'll figure it out pretty quick.
Yeah, and I needed the camera to just kind of stay on the screen too for a while. So this is something that honestly I really want to improve. If I had the ability to rework this, there's something pretty easy I would add to change it. I'll show what that is, but
Okay.
basically the idea though is I want people to, you know, that everybody just kind of walks up here and they're like, oh wait, there's a wall. Well, hold on. Like I can see the mirror of everything on screen. They press taunt and then they fall, and then they're like, oh wow, that's pretty neat. Disregarding that, so let's imagine there's no second door here. I think I can remove, that's a trigger. So let's just imagine there's no second door there for a moment.
Sure.
I kind of a side note, I wanted to pair up certain levels, like ones that would go together with each other.
Yeah.
This just happened to be 2 from Zyke that I paired up. So you fall here and you're like, all right, that's cool. And then you taunt again, you're like, oh man, I got to that level.
Yeah. Right.
So that would be a more interesting version of how to learn the mechanic, in my opinion, just to get to that door.
I think just having the one teleport does it pretty well as well.
I agree. But I feel like you know, you do it once and you're like, wow, I can do this now.
Yeah.
What if I what if I do it again? What if I can keep playing? That's kind
Right,
of
okay.
the point here. I anticipated having more levels that would pair up. So at the time,
I mean, you didn't necessarily have to like have a pair of levels here. You could put them anywhere in the Nexus.
yeah, I was anticipating
there's a lot
having
of
more
spots.
pairs. So initially when I said like, yeah, I could fit like 40 levels in this. Well, yeah, I can. Every single one of these doors has a potential pair. All these shadow doors. We ended up having just under the amount of levels. There's only one door that I had to delete, and then this was the only door that was actually mirrored. So, you know, in retrospect, I don't know. I might have moved Zyke's second level. Not Jake was the only one I was able to really pair them up with.
Right.
With that little island, but this first little puzzle, it's something that people just kind of stumble into, and then they see the results of it. They don't have to think at all, really, that much.
Right.
The only real challenge is like, what if they didn't walk far enough? And keep that in mind. What if they didn't walk far enough? And then also think
the color changing does a pretty good job as well. It's like all
yeah,
the
it
little
will.
things together, I guess.
You know, the it being really faded out on one side is what helped the most for that. But either way, at this point, I personally wanted to steer people upward, but it was important to me, at least later in the Nexus, you know, right after this part, right when you get here, that it opens up and you can kind of explore. You know, at that point it becomes a more open area and not very linear, because I didn't want it to be linear for a Nexus. Like, you have to play the levels in this order.
To free cam.
Yeah. But I do think I should have kept the linearity for this part, and I think I should have kept I should have had a platform here in order to force people to go up. So although I gave people the option to go the other way, you know, it was just a little too easy for them to be like, you know, something like this.
Yeah, I guess it's like you see that door there and you don't see it on the other side, so you're like, I'm just gonna go to this door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just a little too easy to jump up there. It was a little too inviting to just walk over to Mr. Simon's level, in my opinion. So although it was fine, it would have helped reinforce the theme if I just forced people to go along with it a little bit more.
Sure.
Because this is the only linear part of the level, and it actually just wasn't linear enough. Other than the linearity of the end.
Skip it. That makes sense.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I do really like the design philosophy of allowing people to skip certain things if they're like an expert early. So personally speaking, not personally, but what I mean by that is like, if someone can master it pretty quickly, reward them earlier. And this would be a good example of, hey, well, you already understand this concept. You don't have to do the tutorial level of like, going up. And then, like, hey, well, this is really easy to do. That kind of thing. But all this serves to do is just reinforce before you get to a few more levels. And then like the dropping from one level onto the next is also very effective. It just kind of plays itself. There's no thinking associated with it. So that's kind of the point. And then it would just let you off right in front of the next levels if you went that way. So I think
now you've learned the mechanic and you can go do whatever you want.
Yeah. At that point, that is the point. You've learned the mechanic. You'll start to realize like, okay, well, when you get here, you may remember that it's just mirrored from the other side. You may be choosing to, teleport in between the sides a little bit. But at this point, it really opens up because, okay, well, I could go any direction really. And now I'm presented with a lot of possible options. And I didn't want it to overwhelm too much, but I wanted it to feel open, so I try to limit how much I show on screen, but at the same time, I'm trying to show what's relevant to a certain puzzle on screen at all times. And there's only a couple parts where that's not adhered to, which is one of these challenges. So I would expect that at this point, when people get through here, they might play some of these levels. These are kind of, they kind of hint at, you can see a little bit more going on in the level. You can see there's a little bit more over there. It starts to look really complicated. It's a little bit much when you look away from Twinkie's level. So that's one criticism I have of it. Like, it's just a little bit much to keep going on that side. A big jump up.
There's just a lot of colors on screen. I mean, like a lot of colored blocks on screen.
Yeah. But at the same time, part of that was I wanted it to not be immediately evident that, you have these mechanics, but you still have to kind of learn how to use them to really understand how to move around a level. So trying to balance between those two ideas of like, you can see what's going on, you can understand it, and you still have to figure it out because it's a puzzle. That's pretty tough to balance, and this particular section is probably the one that I failed the most of, which or in accomplishing that. But there's some easy potential fixes to do for that to make it more obvious in retrospect. For example, this ramp, like in talking about how to get to these levels, Alex Speedy's level, and also Spiraler's level, they're supposed to be some of the more challenging ones to get to, but it's not supposed to be that challenging to figure out. It's supposed to be a puzzle, but I think it was just a little bit too hard still, because it just wasn't obvious enough that this ramp was there, or that you needed a little boost to get there.
When I tested this, that ramp wasn't colored blocks, and I really like the decision to change it to colored blocks, because it draws attention to it.
Yeah, I would just make it I would make it stand out a lot more. So for instance,
I was gonna say
I would do this.
I don't know that I ever really noticed them when I was playing the competition. Or when I was playing
it just doesn't stand out. So I would have something more like this, and I would take away the other part of the tile.
Okay. Yeah, just really make it like not part of the landscape.
Yep. I had to pay attention to clipping because I didn't want people to clip through the levels. That's the reason for why these vertical walls are not just connected the whole way. It's because if you teleport in between them,
Okay.
you'll you'll just fall right through.
Yeah.
And bam, you're at the secret too early.
Right.
And I was thinking I could work that into the puzzle of how you get to the secret, but
Yeah.
I ended up going with something different.
Just adds another layer of complexity onto it that maybe you don't want.
Yeah. But that's the idea. I wanted to open up, and then I wanted it to do a little bit more of, you know, how everything worked. That one section where the camera starts to detach is the only one that really is problematic.
Yeah.
For the camera, but I didn't bother trying to fix it because that would have been a big mess. So there's supposed to be multiple ways to figure out how to get to each section, and
Yeah, you just kind of wander.
yeah, basically I'm just giving the player that amount of freedom in a very easy environment so that they can get more comfortable with the mechanic. So if they choose to stay on a certain path, I'm gonna force them to switch sides because it's blocked.
Right.
And they can choose to switch sides just as a matter of like I can play around at whatever time they want, because it's faster to not go around.
Yeah.
So then by the time they've they played a few of these levels, then we start to get into the corners away from the middle. And this is where the difficulty picks up a little bit more. Like at this point, we're assuming they're comfortable enough with, they've moved through some of these sections, and now they would be capable of trying to, go to Spiraler or Alex Speedy's or Big Diesel's level.
Okay.
If they're trying to go to Yatier's level, that's a lot more straightforward, because the design of this one is supposed to be like, okay, well, you can get part of the way, but you can see that you can go a little bit farther. Like, hey, you messed up trying to go to this one. Here's your little reward.
Consolation.
But
Okay.
I can't get there by jumping up. The whole point is trying to switch sides. The only problem with the puzzle of getting to Alex Speedy's level, from this perspective, is you can't see the ramp. So you're
Right.
like, what do I do? And you don't think about trying to backtrack.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't stand out
every
here.
other problem in the Nexus has been local.
Yeah. So that's one of the only problematic sections. If I had access to a camera, then I would really easily just do
Right.
this. That would make a lot of
Yeah.
sense really quickly, but I didn't have the ability to code the camera like that.
Right.
So that would have been a really nice fix if I had access to that. But with that in mind, if I had more camera control capabilities, then I could do a lot more. I'd be able to center on the middle for certain things like the multiplayer section too, but I didn't want to attach and detach all the time.
Yeah. It would be a lot of jumping around.
So I ended up designing this climb and this section before I designed the boost over to Alex Speedy's level and Spiralers. But they were supposed to be in relatively similar scope of difficulty. Something that is just a step above all of the easy stuff. Now there's death involved.
Yeah.
Now there's a little bit of timing associated with it.
Right.
Now there are checkpoints. Although I don't actually have a
Hopefully.
checkpoint here. So I guess I am missing
Yeah.
one checkpoint in the Nexus actually. Unless I deleted that earlier.
Yeah, there's one on the other side. Yeah, you might have deleted it by accident. I think that might be the case.
Yeah, I deleted it.
Yeah.
Alright, well. Now there are checkpoints. But either way, I ended up doing this first. And now this is where one of the other problems comes in. Which is people inputting directions while
Yeah.
teleporting.
Yeah.
This is the part where there's like these puzzles are supposed to be the part where they have to learn that they don't need directions anymore. And I can't communicate this in any way in the level itself, because it's just a really awkward kind of thing to learn. So if you want to be careful,
it's like weird to overwrite people's like intuition about things. Like they just have to trust the map maker that they don't have to input directions.
yeah. So just thinking about this tunnel, like this tunnel is supposed to be a very straightforward, puzzle in quotes. But basically it's supposed to make you think about it in terms of it being a puzzle where, all right, now I know how it works. How would I be able to execute going through here? And I personally wouldn't force people to do many inputs, and neither would, most designers, I would assume. But I did find it interesting in what I saw people when they did play it, because I only had Skyhawk playtest a little tiny bit, like an hour beforehand. He was the only person that played it. I did end up seeing that some people were having trouble. They were overcomplicating certain things. And, I allowed for that to be the case because it's so simple. But I was trying to establish in the level already. Everything up to this point is very, very simple. So I'm not trying to make a huge jump in difficulty. I do think that the jump in difficulty in getting to Spiraler and Alex Speedy's level with the boost, that was unnecessarily higher because of the associated camera and slope challenges. But
just like locating all the pieces.
Yeah, but the thing is, the point of that is it's supposed to be one of those things that's also, partially in plain sight that you've already passed. And now you know how it works. You actually could have done it the whole time, but you didn't really understand at this point.
Which I think is a cool theme for Dustforce in general.
Yeah, well that's like a puzzle kind of mindset as well. And it's also reminiscent of how the beginning works, where you see stuff and you don't actually realize it's something that you can do anything with until you get to the middle, and then it kind of sends you on a little journey before you realize, oh yeah, I could have done something. I could have gone out of here the whole time. But then once you get out of there, I pull the same little trick, and you get out from a little boost where like, hey, I could have done something the whole time.
Outer wild sense of discovery. But yeah, just like general cool puzzle design.
But when you get here, I present a really straightforward. When you get to the top, here's a straightforward kind of challenge. And for the people that ended up going here first instead of like the far away side, lower side, they probably learned a little bit more easily, I would guess. But they still did it in a variety of ways. But, just like being careful and understanding, like, don't input directions. That's basically the point of this section. It's supposed to, you're supposed to learn through trial and error at this point. Be careful, and you don't need to input directions. But, that's kind of counterintuitive because people are going to start holding left if they want to go left. So that's one big issue with the teleporting at this point that's noteworthy. Another big issue is everything just changes so rapidly on screen. Like you just switch sides and oh my god, everything has changed.
It takes like a moment for people to react to everything is backwards now,
Yeah, because you can't really distinguish. Like you're looking here, there's something on your right side, now it's suddenly active on your left. Like that part's not exactly symmetrical over here, so you have to know the thing before you do it, which that adds to the issue that we have here. But ideally, once people learn to get around these issues, they make it to that corner, and also this was the only door that I previously deleted. There would have been a door right here.
Right. As kind of a reward for that puzzle sequence.
Yeah. So like Zyke's level could have been here, I guess. The second one. Maybe. But yeah, either way, yeah, we didn't have enough levels for there to need to be another door.
Yeah. And just one had to be removed somewhere.
Yeah. But to further reinforce basically everything that I've done so far, whenever you get past like a little section, I always make you switch again just to get to the door, because I just want to keep reinforcing that you gotta switch. So like you made it through here, and you're like, yeah, that's great. I finally made it through. And then you see that there's the outline of the door. That's your reward, and then you just naturally just switch over. And then you would see, you know, there's just a door there. So that's something that I enjoyed keeping in, because it just adds to that
Cool.
reinforcement. Now at this point, I had 2 little dead ends in my Nexus.
Yeah.
I then figured out like I wanted to use this boost to get to these other 2 levels, and I was like, okay, well, you know, imagine this isn't here, and I've just got 2 big dead ends. Like there's nothing over here.
Right.
I was like, okay, well maybe you fall into something, and then you've got other stuff, but I don't want you to skip one of the puzzles if you do one puzzle first. So that's what made them the dead ends.
Okay.
So the solution to that was like, okay, well, I'll just have red keys and make you do each side. I was trying to think of a cool red key puzzle, but really there was nothing, and I just forced people to switch sides more.
Sure.
Which, yeah, it's still effective, but I wish I could have done something cooler with red keys. It was just no elegant puzzle.
Yeah, and then you also have to like tie in with the levels themselves to get that to work, I think, or maybe do some kind of Nexus script.
Yeah. This also forced me to think about how to make a one-way path. And I already knew that
it's pretty cool how you handled that.
Yeah, I already knew I needed some kind of path to get quickly away from the minigame and back into the normal Nexus. I hadn't really decided on that at this point. And I needed some way to go from here back to something relatively playable. So I needed a little escape area, but I also wanted to make sure that from each of these sections, like you can kind of see there's a little bit more going on. Like, hey, if you look a little bit more closely, I can see that there's more to this level, and it kind of leads somewhere. So from each dead end, you can see the other dead end somewhat.
It's like, oh, I haven't been there yet.
Yeah. And if you happen to get to the red key first, then you're like, okay, well, I can't make it past here because I don't have the other one yet. But at least, you know, because you're on that side, you can see the other door. So I just asked each of these people to put the red key on their levels. They happen to be in a Discord call at the same time, so it was very convenient. And it was really nice, actually, that some of the cool script-heavy levels ended up being the ones that are the red keys. Alex Speedy's is also next to Spiralers, somewhat coincidentally. But yeah, if that one were gold, or if that one were gold that gave a red key, maybe it would have been a little too difficult to guarantee people make it the way through, because I wanted to make sure they weren't too hard either. Because the hard thing was actually the Nexus.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then I figured out a little one-way trick. That was something I had to think about for a while, because it's actually not easy to come up with one-way things in this fashion. You can see both of the ways that I did it on screen. One being horizontal, one being vertical. And the vertical one only works because you kind of clip into it. which is, you know, actually the same of the horizontal one. It only works because you can finally clip into something, which I've been preventing the whole time. Because otherwise you could just walk right up there.
Yeah, taking that problem and turning it into a solution.
Yeah. This ended up still being a little too, you know, clearly there. If I made it a little bit different,
what the heck is this about?
Yeah, but you know, that also, that's something that I didn't mind because, you know, I figured people wouldn't try to figure it out to like too much. You know, just, you know, kind of hoping without playtesting because I didn't have access to that.
I guess because like you come across this relatively early when you haven't quite figured out the mechanic yet, and so you're like, oh, this looks like a thing. Maybe it's something I can do something with this new mechanic, but not.
Yeah.
So they just have to figure that out.
So it was a little tricky to figure out where I wanted to place it. I think I should have put it. Well, it was debatable really. So I was thinking about, do I want to put it on screen at the beginning? And the easier answer to that is no. I don't want to overwhelm the player.
Right. Yeah.
But I still made it really close to the beginning because I want it to be too difficult to understand so that people just kind of skip over it.
Sure.
Like, I want people to just kind of give up on it. Like, I don't understand how this works yet, so I'll just, like, I'm okay with skipping over this for now. There are other doors to think about. Yeah, it didn't fully reach that level, but that was at least the intent. It just didn't pull it off as well as I wanted to.
I could see how that could maybe make sense.
So at this point, all that was left was actually the like I just put in the minigame script, and I was like, okay, well, and now I just I need to get there. And I had a lot of space to work with, because, you know, I had these dead ends, and I just had to decide, like, okay, well, I want to force people to be on certain sides at certain points. Like, you gotta start the minigame, you gotta start the, or not the minigame, you gotta start the extra level here. So, I gotta kind of scare them at first with a little bit of spikes, but not too much danger. Still gotta put some checkpoints for fun. But, you know, they reach here, and at this point, they're like, okay, well, this is about to get serious. Like, I need to kind of scare them at first. But what's important here is I'm still trying to stick to the fundamentals of, you can see what's coming up on screen next, because this is still such a complex issue. Like, you switch sides, and oh my god, everything is just so different. And you can actually see a little preview of why some tiles don't work. But we'll get into that as soon as we get a little bit farther over. And the first thing is supposed to be short but very difficult. Like, you know, here's a checkpoint. Here are 3 blocks that you got to go through really quickly. And I just needed to focus on, like, alright, they got to get used to dying and not feel too bad about it. They'll just respawn right here. It'll be quick. So lots of checkpoints. It's a Nexus, so I don't need to worry about it being too hard. And like, people don't have to worry about it being not accessible, because this is kind of ridiculous if you wanted to SS this. So the fact that you only needed to do it once, and that it just kind of builds up still. Yeah, you only need to do it once. Ever. You know, it all works out really nicely, and I can play with the little gimmicks at this point. I was thinking, like, I could have little funny puzzles with clipping and other janky stuff, but I ended up going away from some of that. So you end up reaching this point. Okay, you end up reaching this point. While I was making the level, that was actually something that I did a lot of. The workflow of editing the level, because everything's symmetric and there's no way to like copy paste and flip or anything like that. I did just have to duplicate everything. So I would place myself somewhere and then teleport over, and then the camera's just there.
That it was all matching. Yeah.
Well, it'd be more like I would place something somewhere and then make sure everything lined up.
Right.
But yeah, I'd had to make sure everything matched up. I don't think there are any inconsistencies. I didn't look too thoroughly, but I mean I was thorough in the process of making it.
Yeah, I didn't notice anything that didn't match.
Yeah. So when you get here, this puzzle was pretty interesting because, actually, right before this, a really little thing. This checkpoint was kind of funny because you can actually kill yourself if you switch, and then are standing on spikes. So I wanted to prevent that a little bit.
Oh yeah.
But you can still kind of do it if you're really careless about it. So I had to move the block a little bit to make sure it's not too dumb. But I mean, people generally aren't gonna do that. Now for this checkpoint right after that, you know, you had to fall through one of them. For each one of those little challenges, I needed to make sure that people, basically I'm filtering what side everybody starts on all the time.
Right.
And that's what, you know, leads into it being a puzzle. So you see lots of doubled up blocks as a result of this, because, you know, they have to go through one and then land on it again. So if the level just alternated every single time between every single block, it'd just be very repetitive and not really that challenging. And a lot of sections would actually be easy to skip because you just start on one and then you just like go around one thing and then you're there. So by doubling up on certain blocks, you prevent that kind of thing, because well, now you have to do something and immediately switch.
Yeah, you have to be on this side to start, so it just gives you as the map maker more control.
Yeah. And also these little platforms that you just stand on for a little break are only on one side too. But that's only this section. Now for climbing, if I originally had these big walls right next to the spikes, which is okay, except what actually happens is if they're immediately next to the spikes, it's actually possible to clip into them.
Really?
So let's say I have this over here also. So like that. If you switch a little too late, then you'll be in the middle of the block. And that's similar to the one way that I have over here.
The wall. Yeah.
Yeah, so for that climbing section, I needed to put them one tile away from the wall so that I couldn't have the one-way clip.
Yeah, don't let them cheese the whole thing.
Yeah. In terms of climbing, there's also a very funny quirk with okay, so let me show how twirlies work. So I also discovered that it's possible to just twirly infinitely with this, because you can see with the values, last wall run is the value that you're supposed to be looking at. This is -1, yep. That's the face. You're facing that direction, that's left. Then you switch sides.
Mirror,
yeah, you switch sides, and it's like, hey, well, you just climbed a left wall? Alright, well, you can climb a right wall now if you want.
Yeah. That's great.
So you just you switch sides in between each one. I thought about putting that into a puzzle. Didn't end up following through with it. It would have been a little too janky, in my opinion.
Yeah, that one's a little like non-obvious. There's nothing in the gameplay to kind of signal that that's what you need to do.
Yeah, but I ended up doing what's a relatively classic kind of switch, and you can see if I frame advance, it looks like everything just kind of doesn't load immediately. That's because everything's actually so far away, and I start in the air because the tiles aren't there yet.
Yeah, even though like the spawn is on the ground, but yeah, there's just nothing. There's no ground there.
Yeah. Fortunately, when I realized that didn't affect the gameplay in terms of like, anything significant with physics. It did actually affect checkpoints, which I didn't realize until after it was released how it worked.
Right.
But there was a funny hint in playtesting, because at this point, this checkpoint is now so far away from the other checkpoint that it doesn't exist. So I might have the checkpoint that's right here, but it doesn't exist anymore.
Checkpoint, and it still would have saved your position at the checkpoint. I don't know that that's.
Well, that is how it works. So let me reset this level now. So you can see that there are checkpoints everywhere. So.
Yeah. So
now
here,
once I go here.
No, like don't teleport at all. Just what happens if you just die? Like.
Yeah. Now, that's not the whole story though. It like what ends up being awkward is that for some reason when you when you start at a certain location, it's like close enough to load a certain aspect of it, I guess. But there's still this strange disconnect between how it actually works. Where it's loaded so much.
Distance related somehow.
It's loaded so much that it doesn't keep track of it.
Even in this test you just did, it's weird that you didn't hit the checkpoint on the yellow side or the orange side, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem I ran into on Dustforce Arcade, is checkpoints not registering after long distance teleports.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something weird there. I'm not 100% sure that it's.
Yeah, so we don't fully understand it yet, but it does have to do with the distance. Because, like Avenged just said, it's exactly the same kind of problem that he ran into.
Yeah, but yeah, there are still details of that we haven't.
Yeah, now
really
this.
Picked apart.
If I knew about it in advance, I could have fixed it with like manually scripting checkpoints. Just write your own script for a checkpoint, in theory. But I didn't realize that it worked this way. So unfortunately, all of the checkpoints from there on don't work. So it meant that people had to go from this checkpoint, whatever side they were on, to the end of the level, the mini game, without dying. And that is not the intent.
You don't really come across this problem just because everything's closer to the origin. Like these parts are the farthest out in the Nexus.
And yeah, that's why it happens here, is because, as you said, it's the farthest point out of the Nexus. I will be honest as well, I have absolutely no idea why this happens, and I have no idea why my fix on Dustforce Arcade works.
Yeah, I'm not 100% clear either. This is very strange.
It's like you have to load a middle ground sometimes. Or not.
Maybe.
It's weird. But either way, unfortunately, this happens at the point where checkpoints are the most necessary. Because this is where I start to abuse the mechanic a little bit. This falling section is the only part where I'm intentionally unfair to the player. So I give a little preview of what's to come with being able to show everything off on screen and not being able to adjust the camera and zoom out a lot. I have basically what amounts to a joke immediately following it, but it's supposed to be just this one-off kind of thing where like all right, well, I got your joke, and then you move on. But if you had to play that repeatedly, that's that's clearly not the intent of a joke. So you go through this section. You're like, all right, well, that's the intro to I got to be careful right here, and then I'm not gonna get that all the time. But then, hey, well, why am I way back here?
Right. Yeah. Back before the wall climb even.
Yeah. But then you're supposed to get through there after a few tries. Not supposed to be too crazy. It is supposed to be unfair though. It's the only part where I don't show everything on screen that isn't, that one half of getting the Alex Speedy and Spiralers level. Yeah,
I remember first time I got to that section, I was like, okay, maybe there's 3 walls, and then I would die. And it's like, okay, maybe there's 4 walls, and then I would die. So it's just like surprising the player with how many you have to switch through.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the camera just sucks for the part, but I made the most of it.
Doesn't interact well with reporting.
Now, immediately following it is supposed to be what amounts to what can be a boost section or something that you can be a little bit more precise on. This is also where, like, all of this that you can see on screen, this section, it not being playtested is a big issue. Like, only Skyhawk being able to play for, like, not that long. Me not being able to spend
maps in general.
Yeah, me not being able to spend so much time on it because it's a map jam. Yeah, that's what we get. So unfortunately, some parts about it didn't really work the way I wish. But at the very least, I was able to make it so that multiple solutions could still work. For instance, you can start this with a boost. It's not great to get a boost, and you could choose to keep it while going left or right. At this point, you could potentially realize that left friction plays a part, which is kind of funny how that works out. I thought about trying to make it part of the requirement, but I thought, like, okay, well, that would be a little bit too much of a jump. I don't have like a medium boost to get here. This is just, this is you get it or you don't. This is the hardest part, and there's not really a good lead into getting boosts and doing this, so I don't really care for how this ended up being, or how this ended up working out as like a finale to the puzzles. It was good that it had options, multiple ways to go through it, but it was still not good enough at all. So it wasn't even close. But it was a good part to.
I'm most curious about.
The next part.
The slope boost. Like I'm not sure what the intended strats were for this section.
You mean why there's a slope? All it's supposed to do is
just. Just what is the player supposed to do? Because I think the strats that I ended up using were not the intended strats. So I'm curious what the intended strats were here.
Yeah, so I don't think that's very well communicated, what I just said. Where I implied that, you could do it a few different ways.
Oh, I thought you were talking about, like, the previous hallway.
Oh, I was combining both.
I see.
And, in theory, you could say it looks like they could be combined a little bit because there's a slope, you could keep speed, but you don't have to. I didn't want to make it so hard that it was required to keep speed because that would have been really tough. But it's there, so it kind of hints that you can keep speed and it would make it easier.
Right.
But it's still really hard to execute, and it's really hard to react to the switches. So that's what added so much to the challenge, because it's just not natural. This unfortunately just exemplifies those kinds of flaws, because it just jumps up a little bit too much. Doesn't really lead into it very well, in my opinion, and it just highlights the flaws. If there were a better lead in, it would have been a little bit more appropriate, but it still would have highlighted the flaws.
I'm kind of curious to see you go through this section.
Nah.
What? Oh, alright then.
So I think this might be a little bit differently spaced when I did it also, because I was like, I really didn't get as much time to play this part.
Yeah.
But this is just too
because you gotta
tight.
like time the jump here.
Yeah, then you gotta do it again. So,
Yeah.
if you were to be careful and just play it from a stop, it should be possible just to go through here.
Nice.
And like,
Clean.
I didn't need to do the wall run at the end. I actually held the wrong direction. Like, I still messed up that kind of stuff. That, like, me having an issue with this is a huge issue. If I can't even do this, like,
Right.
this is just awful. Like, I just didn't. I was only doing it like a few times, and I just made sure it's okay to do it slow. So like, you know,
as long as there's like multiple ways to go through.
yeah, if you wanted to be
Figure out a way that works best
really
for them.
careful, then you know you can just be really careful and get it.
Yeah. So that was the strat that I used.
Yeah.
So.
You know, that is the easy kind of way, and you figured it out a lot more easily than other people, from what I noticed.
Cool.
But if you
there's also
if
the
you
option
wanna
of doing the boost.
Yeah, if you want to do the boost, what I was thinking was people would try to do what I'm showing right now, with like you try to do a dash, then you're like, oh my god, I hit this wall, but you're not thinking that like, well, hold on, that wall's not even there on the other side.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier to go to the wall, or to the middle wall, in that manner.
Right.
So people still weren't skilled enough at, you know, understanding that part of the concept. They weren't trained enough to think about it from that perspective yet. Because I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to make them do all this crazy inputs, that kind of stuff, because like I can't do that. But yeah, I'm trying to show that it can be a little simpler. Like, you only need to change a few times. But, you know, you can still mess up.
Yeah.
But at the very least, you can see all of the blocks that are there. You can't see the, you know, the ending, but you can see all the blocks that are going to be used on the slope.
Right. Yeah.
So, that was still a big part.
Okay, cool.
And some people figured out that, you know, you can just switch every single time, and that was also a possibility.
Yeah, neat.
But I made sure that some of the walls didn't have spikes because of that. So yeah, I didn't want people to try to do boosts while switching. That would have been a little too strange. But like, you know, getting that like little boost
dash rhythm
should help.
And also doing taunt rhythm.
Yeah,
to go between the blocks.
Yeah, that's in theory how it's supposed to work. You do a bunch of dashes, then you have to do the couple taunts to get on the other side of some stuff. But you know, you should realize, like I'd want to delete some stuff also. Like I don't want there to be blocks there actually, which I didn't fully make the case.
See? Yeah, see what you mean.
So that's actually the only remnant of
oh yeah.
Yeah, looks like that's the only inconsistency that I have. But I took that one out because, you know, the idea of this block is I want people to do it from a certain side. Like, I don't want them to do it from this side. But then I ended up moving it to the other side, and I moved it here. and I just I simplified how many total blocks were in there.
Right. And then there's some kind of thing there with left friction.
Yeah, so now you can boost from either side without theoretically this block. But yeah, this technically isn't supposed to be there anyway. So
right.
Yeah, one of the few mistakes.
Okay. Oh, and then once you're through that hallway.
Yeah, once you're through, then I switched the music trigger, and I give you enough time to let the music kind of build up. Yeah, this was a kind of interesting thing to think about, because you get here and you're like, all right, like I wanted to make some kind of visual thing, kind of hint like, you know, there's stuff off to the left. Like you might have to switch sides depending on what side you're on. If you're on a certain side, I want it to be very evident that you should go towards my name, but I really don't have any visuals, so I couldn't focus on that.
Yeah, just because of the camera stuff.
Yeah, so if you happen to be on this side, if you happen to be on the purple side, then I would force you to switch, and then, you know, clearly there's one direction that I'm trying to suggest you go, but there's not that much visual stuff going on. It's only something blocking you off on the left, but then you're like, well, what if I switch and go away from it just to make sure I don't miss anything?
That exploring thing. Yeah, oh, I guess because it's like a zip kind of thing, you really don't want people to go the wrong way first.
Yeah. So I tried to put it off screen, which, you know, has pros and cons also, but then I also try to be like, well, don't do that yet, go to the other side. You know, it looks intimidating enough, and you should hopefully have seen the other side of that at that point, so you're like, all right, well, I should go to that other side. And then I tried to make you fall in to the minigame without killing you. Somehow the death zones didn't work for some people.
I don't know what's up with that either.
That's the one thing that I don't understand. When it comes to the checkpoints not working, I feel like my internal thoughts are like, you know, they're close enough to what's really the case, but then people being like,
maybe
I unloaded. I'm just like, what? There's like, that's not true.
if we could understand that, I think we would understand the checkpoints really well too.
Yeah.
But yeah, right now it's a mystery.
But then you got a minigame.
Yeah. And we already kind of discussed the mechanics of that.
Yeah. So, really the only final thing was putting doors in and deleting example ones. If you're curious
just a matter
about
of knowing exactly how many levels there are.
Yeah, if you're curious about the door outline, that's just props on a certain layer.
Everything is all just books.
Yeah.
We've learned this.
I tried my own. I tried to use books on my own for this to see how it worked out, and I made a little outline of doors.
Yeah, I like the really tiny book to get the inside corner.
Yeah, those little books on the corners are necessary. It's a few of them stacked up.
Okay.
Honestly, what isn't books at this point? Seems like just about every prop is books.
Yeah, that was my exploration of books.
Crazy fancy, probably just a bunch of books.
I mean, it's just the most basic shape you can work with.
I think that's pretty much it. That describes the story of the level.
Alright,
because
I
at this
only
point,
have one question left at this point. And it's, what's your high score on the minigame?
0, according to the saved high score. It's around 80. I don't remember, honestly. It is. I wish I could have some kind of leaderboard associated with it, but you know, that.
I guess you could maybe take this and put it into a level. Oh, but then I don't know how you would have like a leaderboard that prioritizes high score.
You'd just make a plugin for it that does nothing, and have it go to the plugin high score.
Yeah, so that requires you to play the plugin while playing the level, though, unfortunately.
Right, it wouldn't be the default leaderboard. You can maybe have it like just go to, like the level ends when you get to a certain score. And so if people don't get to 50 or whatever,
I still get mixed up on that too.
yeah.
I find it really funny when people switch sides and they're just not ready for it.
Yeah.
It's part of the challenge.
And they just like attack the wrong direction.
And then you
It's
fall
just
through.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've done that a few times.
but yeah, when I was testing this, I did get in the 70s and 80, at least. So if you're curious about the difficulty capping, there are 3 factors in the difficulty of this. There's one, the speed at which the prisms go down. This is actually uncapped. This will always go up, no matter what.
So I guess
if your
there
score
is
goes higher,
theoretically a limit where you just can't reach the prisms anymore.
Yeah, this is the only one that is uncapped. So there's theoretically the limit where, you know, prisms will move too fast such that you cannot possibly hit them in time before they die. And yeah, I don't think anyone will go that far, but that'd be funny.
We gotta
need
get
a
past
task for
it.
this.
Yeah. Great minds think alike.
Yeah, go ahead if you can. I don't know how tasking the Nexus would work, unfortunately. You need a Nexus
I don't
script,
think you'd be able to...
and this does
I don't
use the
think you'd be
built-in
able
random. So it would
Yeah,
be
sharing it might be
really
wrong.
awkward. I would have to
I was
rewrite
thinking more
how the
along the
random
lines of-
happens too.
Avenge just can't get a word in.
Yep.
I was thinking more along the lines of wouldn't save a replay just for theory going through it in frame advance.
Yeah.
You could also just copy the script over. You can copy both of these scripts over, put them in your own map. The only distinction is it's hard-coded that the prism starts there.
Right.
So, like this prism doesn't actually exist. It gets placed there.
I see what you're saying.
So it gets manually
as long
placed
as
at a
you
certain
build the
location.
level. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's at like 1200 or something, roughly. Why? Around there. So you just got to put it kind of lower than normal. That's pretty much it, though. And then I had to do some camera tricks so that it focused on this area, and then it allowed you to reset the size as you left. I needed a... this one's force, I think. Oh, this one's also just connect, and then 2 detaches, just in case. Because this is a different camera size, and I needed to reset it.
The kind of minimum resizing camera path.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So the other 2 factors, though, are the rate that they spawn, and then that caps
so
at like
just more skill
60,
at once.
I think. So when you reach score
60
score 60,
Gotcha.
then that's the fastest that they will spawn consecutive prisms.
Okay.
It's still random when it'll spawn exactly, but there's a range.
Right.
But it's fastest then. And then the rate at which they switch sides. So it's programmed to spawn on a certain side, but randomly it'll choose to switch what side, basically.
Okay. Yeah, because it's easier if they're all just on one side, then it's like the gimmick isn't even present.
Yeah, so it starts relatively low. It doesn't happen too often, but when it reaches, I think, around 60 or 80 again, you know, some of these numbers might be a little off, but around 60 or 80, it reaches the 50-50. And then it stays at 50-50.
Right.
So
yeah, it'd be kind of weird.
effectively, it's random at that point what side each prism's on.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Because, yeah, switching like every prism maybe be a bit overkill.
And then finally, trying to design the zip up. It was interesting to think about it. It's really hard to have a one-way, though. So like if I had any gap in between these, I needed to make it one way so that you could only go up into it.
Yeah.
If it was hard to do anything that you couldn't just go down through, so I had to make it so that you clipped into it at the start. Like some of this stuff is unnecessary. But basically, you enter what ends up being the zip, and then you don't actually need to clip, or you don't actually need to switch sides at that point, but it's
Yeah,
really
you
cool.
just jump up.
And at this point, people are reinforced to do it, so it feels really cool to do it. It looks kind of cool. But you can just jump up through at that point. I couldn't. I didn't have any better solution, unfortunately, but it's still effective.
I think it
I
works
like,
well.
yeah, I like the spam, because you know you don't get to just spam it.
Yeah, there's not many other places where that's beneficial.
Yeah, it's only like 2 parts in a row, ever, except for the falling, where that's the only other part
Yeah,
you
the
can validate
joke one that
spamming
we
it.
mentioned. Yeah. And then you're back to the beginning.
Yep. And then I let you do the tome because of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think having the tome outside of the Nexus is pretty standard for Dustforce Nexuses.
I like having them inside also, but
Yeah,
they
maybe.
need a
There's been
good
a few of
placement
them.
and a good reason.
Yeah. But I mean, like, just general precedent, like the vanilla Nexus, the tomes are outside of the Nexus. So I think just that sort of has carried over to custom Nexuses and how we design the tomes for them.
Yeah. So that's my story
very
of
few
forcibly
Nexus.
teaching people to learn stuff too.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, like, how much detail goes into the planning of, like, what the player's going to see next and that kind of thing. It's very deliberate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that I like paying attention to for level design. Especially if you're trying to teach new things, new mechanics. That's where it's most
Absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's also very interesting handling base player knowledge, trying to expect a certain level of play.
Sure. Yeah.
Because, you know, levels, you don't know what level of play someone is going to be at when they play your level, and a level is just so separate from everything else.
Yeah.
But that's probably where I'll end the episode. I'm gonna be right back.
All right. Any
Yeah,
closing
feel free to ask
thoughts?
questions and stuff too.
Yeah, if anybody in chat wants to hear anything